Drew, from my perspective, you're the what I would call the #1 music blogger in the world. I think it would be helpful for our audience to understand what is blogging.
Sure.
And then perhaps how you got into it.
Well, blogging in general covers a very wide gambit, actually. It's almost like asking someone, what is a musician? There's quite a bit to it. Blogging can be something as simple as, any individual posting their thoughts and musings online on a whole variety of topics, as opposed to something, what I do, which is a very dedicated subject, which is about orchestra management and issues that affect the orchestra business. Mm-hmm. And that makes it different from the standpoint that it's not just purely opinion. It's not even standard mainstream journalism. It's not traditional writing, but it's not strictly opinion. It's really something new, which makes it really a lot of fun to do as well. In the last year alone, I know when I started 2 years ago, there were next to nobody doing what I do now, just the host of folks at Arts Journal writing about different subjects in different mediums of art. But now there are quite a few individuals that actually write about music, sometimes very specific sects of music, and others that do more broad-based arts, nonprofit topics.
Mm-hmm. So you set something in motion, I hope.
Well, I'd like to think I got it on the ground floor. I don't think I'm responsible in the least. If anything, credit is due to Arts Journal editor Doug McLennan, who, of course, founded Arts Journal and started the idea of having industry experts come in and just have a forum where they could talk about what they want to talk about without restrictions. That's one very unique aspect of this is we don't really have someone with editorial control over us telling us what to write and when to write it.
That would be a distinct difference between being a blogger and a reporter.
As far as working for a mainstream journalist reporting, yes, I would agree with that completely. For my particular case, other bloggers at Arts Journal are different. I actually do some what would be considered traditional mainstream reporting, actually. I go out, I gather facts, I interview, I ask questions, and I'll put forth factual articles. There's no opinion in them. And other times I'll mix opinion in with it, and other times something is just pure opinion alone.
That's very interesting. What is your overall impression of American orchestras?
There's never been a better time to be in the business.
Wow,
I honestly think that. The artistic quality and artistic output of American orchestras, I don't think, has really ever been better. There isn't a time in history, at least in this country, where there have been as many ensembles putting out as many high-quality artistic concerts on such a large basis as there is right now. Now, the other side of that, of course, is the financial and economic aspect, where orchestras are having a great deal of difficulty with some issues, but not all orchestras. Some are doing quite well right now.
What would you say is working particularly well among American orchestras right now?
The ability actually to produce a good artistic product, even in organizations that don't necessarily pay a living wage or have full-time musicians. These ensembles with limited rehearsal time and very erratic rehearsal conditions are still putting out very, very high-quality product, which is everything an administrator could want to be able to sell to the public. It makes their job even easier.
What's particularly interesting when you think of the landscape? What comes to mind as particularly interesting?
Right now, in the last couple of years, of course, the benchmark event is 9/11, and everyone compares how things were before then to after. After that, I think I've noticed a very large trend toward issues of governance, meaning everyone's taking the time to re-examine the way the model of governance works inside orchestras and determining whether or not that's the direction they want to continue going, or if they want to refine a process that they already have, something I think that's overlooked in the business, actually. And I see that as an outgrowth of other issues that are involved in the business. Some of these financial and economic pressures sometimes actually spurn wanting to move in that direction or not, but sometimes they're actually the impetus of wanting to re-examine how things are done because there simply aren't any other solutions in certain places.
I'm implying that when you talk about governance, you mean that the various entities within the organization are working closer together.
Yes, I think they absolutely are. And of course, the entities traditionally are considered the board of directors, senior executive management, and then musicians. And then you'll have the music director as their own little island unto themselves inside organizations that have control over governance issues. The thing I think which needs to be examined a little closer than what probably is so far is everyone keeps talking about changing the model of how orchestras work. And in reality, they're just shuffling around the pieces inside the same model, even though they shift more power and control to one side or have more inclusion of one side over another. They all work in not just a 19th century model of what an orchestra is, but they also have to work with inside what the federal government classifies as a nonprofit organization. Until anyone decides to step outside of that restriction, and in some cases it's a blessing, but from a restriction standpoint, I mean that the board is entrusted with all legal authority to make decisions. Until that's really addressed, there are only so far, well, changes can only go so far, because any program is only as good as the people who are working with it and in it. And as soon as those players in that combination change, a system that may be working very well may start to fall apart. And when something tends to fall apart, when crisis hits organizations, I've noticed that they always tend to fall back to that legal definition of what a nonprofit is. The board gets to make the decisions. And that sometimes is a good solution and sometimes causes even more problems.
Have you thought much about other organizational structures? Because I've been increasingly troubled by it seems as if the not-for-profit, the 501c3 model, well, of course it offers tremendous advantages, not the least of which is the tax deduction.
Right.
But it seems to create almost or encourage a series of behaviors among players within. And of course the opposite of it, or maybe the only other viable model, is a straight business.
Right.
And that doesn't have, I can't see that necessarily working either.
I think it'd be extremely difficult as well, too. You would lose foundation support and too much large money.
Have you imagined at all a quasi-mixture of...
Well, I think this actually touches back to what I mentioned a little earlier, which is the organizations which are working on refining the process that they have, meaning they work with inside the restrictions. Restrictions are not necessarily bad things. I know, just from personal experience, I have a much easier time solving problems or writing articles or writing music or performing if there's someone that's setting very distinct boundaries to what I have to do. The mind doesn't tend to wander off quite so much. And I think orchestras would benefit from taking the time to learn how to use the system that's in place, meaning you do have the nonprofit 501c3 where the board is entrusted with the legal authority and their decision is final. Now, inside that, what we have is the traditional labor structure of collectively bargained musicians that work with the board and management to determine not just what their compensation and benefits are going to be, but in the organizations where the musicians are doing their part, I think, they also use that negotiation and the collective bargaining agreement to actually influence the strategic direction of the organization. And that does not have to mean conflict. It doesn't have to mean there's things that are going to go wrong. There are some superb examples out there right now, like Nashville. Is probably one of the happiest orchestras on earth right now.
To talk about it.
Well, Nashville uses no special model. They use the same basic collective bargaining agreement that everyone else uses. To a large part, they make their system work because of the people who are involved. They have